like most Americans, believe that the Second Amendment guarantees an individual the right to bear arms. I think we recognize the traditions of gun ownership that passed on from generation to generation, that hunting and shooting are part of a cherished national heritage. But I also believe that a lot of gun owners would agree that AK-47s belong in the hands of soldiers, not in the hands of criminals. That they belong on the battlefield of war, not on the streets of our cities.
Well, there's some things I disagree with if you're pertaining towards gun control. First off the bat, the average American citizen is never going to get their hands on an AK-47. AK-47s are imported arms with plenty of laws and restrictions applied to them. And the legal AK-47s that actually get into the hands of civilians have to be brought in after a long series of expensive, complicated paperwork, not to mention fees and taxes associated to even owning the arm. Therefore, the only people who do legally own AK-47s happen to be wealthy gun store owners or gun collectors. It is the illegal AK-47s brought in by crime groups or perhaps flawed government programs like Fast and Furious that we have to worry about. And also, we have to stop this villainization of the AK-47. Alright, the AK-47 is less lethal than any hunting rifle that fires a .308, and especially those which fire a .30-06 cartridge. The 7.62x39 intermediate cartridge is less lethal, and in fact most civilian AK-based weapons fire even weaker cartridges. Not to mention civilian AKs are semi-automatic, not to be confused with fully automatic. But anyway, if civilians were to arm themselves against these crime groups and their AK-47s, I would suggest an AK-based weapon due to the fact that AKs are very reliable. Reliable weapons have less mistakes, less problems, and therefore you don't have to worry about so much collateral damage and innocents being killed and injured. But when you start talking about separating the arms that the military could own from arms that civilians could own, you're going against our American culture. A militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It was our American colonists that fought the biggest, strongest army on the face of the earth at the time, which of course was the British Army, but the British Army was actively engaging in arms roundups because the colonists brought whatever they had in their possession into military service. Alright, and also we have to stop with this whole idea that American cities aren't already loaded with violence. American cities for many decades have looked like bombed out war zones. So, in reality, citizens should have a right to have a good weapon to defend themselves, and also it's important to bring up the fact that when I hear something, alright, about the Second Amendment, I think of things more than just hunting and other recreational shooting. I shared a little bit what I believe. Let me hear what you believe.
I believe the majority of gun owners would agree that we should do everything possible to prevent criminals and fugitives from purchasing weapons. That we should check someone's criminal record before they can check out a gun seller. That a mentally unbalanced individual should not be able to get his hands on a gun so easily.
Well, there's some problems with that too. Because it may start off as good common sense regulation, but as time goes on, we start having issues where the government perverts new laws. Alright, it starts off that, okay, mass murderers shouldn't get their hands on guns. That makes sense. But pretty soon people get speeding tickets, people who see psychologists, people who are on prescription drugs, people who may just have different political beliefs now can't get guns. And it may just be guns in general, maybe it'll be things like pistols or long rifles, until eventually no guns are legal. Alright? You know, we take a step from Hitler here, alright? Hitler said the best way to conquer a nation is to disarm its people. We also learned from World War II that with the Holocaust, it started off as certain little different minority groups until eventually everyone was in a concentration camp and there was no one to yell help to. Alright, I have a personal story to share. I happen to know a first selectman from a prominent Connecticut town. He actually was a chief of police at one time. And he actually bought a book known as the Arsonist Cookbook. Now, because of a simple book purchase, he is now on the no-fly list and can't fly planes. This man was responsible for upholding laws, the American way of life, and serving his constituents, and now is deemed a possible terrorist. Alright, so God only knows what will happen with gun laws. So, basically, what I'm trying to say is that if I was trying to set up a tyrannical state in the United States, alright, I would start with small incremental steps. How do you feel in these steps?
These steps shouldn't be controversial, they should be common sense. So I'm going to continue to work with members of both parties, and with religious groups, and with civic organizations, to arrive at a consensus around violence reduction.
If you're talking about reducing crime, one of the best ways to end crime is actually to allow guns. Every time we've had a gun ban in DC and Chicago, and even nationwide like in Australia, crime went through the roof almost immediately, including gun-related crime. In fact, right before this horrible Batman shooting, we had a situation where a 71-year-old man saved dozens of people in an internet lounge when two armed criminals came in. We recently had a case where a gentleman saved the life of a police officer after one of his neighbors went insane and killed two unarmed neighbors. It was the man who had an arm that was able to save the life of a police officer and other people in his community. My fear is that politicians might take horrible shootings and horrible other events and use them to promote certain political agendas.
Our hearts break for the victims of the massacre in Aurora. We pray for those who were lost, and we pray for those who love them. We pray for those who are recovering with courage and with hope. And we also pray for those who succumb to the less publicized acts of violence that plague our communities in so many cities across the country every single day.